Lee Haney won 8 Mr. Olympia titles and went unbeaten for 8 straight years, earning a reputation as one of bodybuilding's greatest champions. But away from the stage, he's faced a much longer battle with his health. The story of that fight reveals a side of Haney most fans have never seen. The middle of this year, the bodybuilding world got hit with news nobody saw coming. Word started spreading online that Lee Haney was seriously ill. Some posts went further than that. Rumors claimed he died. For a guy who spent 8 straight years as the most dominant physique on the Mr. Olympia stage, that kind of rumor spreads fast, and it spread even faster once his own family got involved. It started with his son. Joshua Haney posted on social media, breaking news that had apparently been kept private for years. First time sharing this, "My dad needs a kidney donor. Please keep him in your prayers and share if you can." Joshua Haney's Instagram post read, adding that his father is a blessing to so many others and breathes life into all he does. There is more work to do. His daughter, Olympia, joined in on the same post. Together, they laid out the timeline that had been hiding behind their father's public image for decades. The post explained that 26 years earlier, Lee Haney had been told he would eventually need a kidney transplant, and that through faith, proper nutrition, and exercise, he'd managed to delay it for years. But now his kidney was failing, and he was hoping to find a living donor. They even attached a link and a QR code so people could apply. That's when things got messy, because right as that post went up, rumors about his death started circulating too, and Haney had to step in himself to shut it down. The 66-year-old opened up on social media after rumors began circulating that he was very ill, saying, "I am alive and well." It's appalling to see how fast rumors can spread. "Yes, I am in need of a living kidney donor, as communicated by my 2 awesome children." He didn't stop there. Haney wanted his fans to know exactly where his head was at, even with a failing organ. He wrote that many people had sent prayers his way, and he appreciated them deeply, and that his approach was to be proactive as he faced this current challenge. He leaned hard into his faith throughout the post, saying his belief in God had always been his source of strength, and closing with a line that told fans not to worry about the worst-case scenario just yet, insisting he was still well and fully functional, and that he wasn't needed in heaven at the time. Within hours, the comments under his posts turned into something close to a public donor drive. Fans, other lifters, complete strangers, all of them flooding the thread with offers. One commenter pointed out that everyone was saying they were praying for his dad, but nobody was asking what his blood type was, while another declared they'd give Lee Haney a kidney and were ready to go. Joshua had to step back in and clarify the process, telling people to fill out the donor questionnaire regardless of their blood type, explaining that the form itself filters out who's eligible, and that right now they were simply looking for anyone interested to apply. For a man who spent his career being called indestructible, this was the first time the public had seen him ask for help, not with training, not with motivation, but to literally survive. Local outlets in Georgia, where Haney lives and still runs his fitness programs, picked the story up almost immediately. Reports described Haney as facing his toughest challenge yet, a search for a living kidney donor after managing a chronic condition for nearly 30 years, with the community icon calling on his global network to help. Outlets noted that potential donors had to be between the ages of 18 and 65, and that Haney and his team had even set up a phone line for anyone serious about applying. What made this hit different wasn't just the diagnosis. It was who it was happening to. This isn't some anonymous case of kidney disease. This is a man whose entire identity, his brand, his books, his TV shows, his entire second career after competing, is built on the idea that health and fitness are things you can control if you just work hard enough. His accomplishments are difficult to overstate. The 5'11" bodybuilder dominated competitive bodybuilding throughout the 1980s, winning the Mr. Olympia title 8 consecutive times between 1984 and 1991, a record shared only with Ronnie Coleman that remains one of the most celebrated achievements in the sport's history. And now that same man was standing in front of cameras and microphones, admitting his own body had been quietly failing him since before some of his fans were even born. To understand how big this news really was, you have to understand how long Lee Haney had been sitting on it. This wasn't a sudden diagnosis. This wasn't a shock that hit him out of nowhere last year. According to his own family, this thing had been ticking inside him for over 2.5 decades. Through his entire post-competition life, through every seminar, every TV appearance, every fitness program he sold to the public, Haney gave an interview laying out exactly how the discovery happened. And it's about as random as it gets for something this serious. He was on his property dealing with livestock when it started. A goat got loose, so he had to chase it down. And when he caught it and jumped on it, he took a hit to the stomach. Later, he noticed blood in his urine and went to get it checked out. That visit changed everything. The doctor examined him and told him he had a cyst on his kidney, explaining that someone in his family must have had congenital polycystic kidney disease. That was the moment the clock started. A man built like a statue at the peak of his physical powers, walking away from a routine checkup with a lifelong condition attached to his name. Polycystic kidney disease isn't something you fix with discipline. It's not something diet and training reverse. Its genetic cysts form on the kidneys over time, growing, multiplying, slowly crowding out the healthy tissue until the organ can't keep up anymore. For most people who have it, doctors are already talking about eventual kidney failure the moment they're diagnosed. Haney was told the same thing. Eventually, he'd need a transplant. The only question was when. For a man who'd spent his entire adult life being told his body was the standard everyone else should chase, that's a brutal piece of information to sit on quietly. And sit on it he did for 26 years. He kept competing publicly as a fitness figure, kept building his brand around vitality, kept telling other men over 50 that they could reclaim their health if they just followed his program, all while managing a condition that was going to end in exactly this moment, no matter what he did. Haney publicly announced that his kidneys were failing and that he desperately needed a donor, a reminder of how fragile health can be no matter how strong someone looks on the outside. And the most striking part of the story was that he'd been battling this for a whopping 26 years. That's not a footnote. That's the whole story. The most dominant bodybuilder of his era had been fighting a war nobody could see. The entire time, the public saw him as untouchable. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Because the moment the news broke, the assumptions came flying in immediately. Anyone who spent time around bodybuilding forums knows exactly where people's minds go when a legend of the sport develops kidney problems. Steroids, growth hormone, decades of supplements stacked on top of a genetically massive frame. The whispers started before Haney had even finished his first public statement. He addressed it directly, and he didn't dance around it. In a world where performance-enhancing substances are often immediately pointed to when problems like this arise, Haney firmly rejected those rumors, explaining instead that his condition is a genetic thing. He didn't get defensive about people jumping to conclusions either. He said he understood why people would assume that, admitting he'd seen the comments online, but explained that people just don't know what they don't know, that he didn't blame them for making those assumptions, because that's often the case in the industry. But that in his case, it was different. Then he gave the receipts. He pointed to his uncle, who lived to 75 and never competed in bodybuilding a day in his life, along with several of his cousins, all of whom had struggled with kidney disease. Proof in his eyes that this was simply genetics running through his family tree. That distinction mattered to him. Polycystic kidney disease doesn't care how much muscle you're carrying or how many titles you've won. It's a hereditary condition that can show up in family members who never touched a barbell in their life. Haney wanted the public to understand that his body wasn't betraying him because of anything he did in the gym. It was a card he'd been dealt long before he ever stepped on stage in 1983. Still, 26 years is a long time to carry something like that in silence. 2.5 decades of press tour, television specials, and motivational speeches, all happening under the shadow of a diagnosis that guaranteed this day was coming. The man who told America it could outtrain aging had been quietly managing the one thing training can't fix. To really feel the weight of what's happening to Haney now, you need to understand the size of the shadow he cast over the sport for almost 40 years, and how completely that image of invincibility got built into everything he did afterward. Haney entered his first Mr. Olympia contest in 1983, at a time when Samir Bannout sat on the throne as the man to beat. And it was around this period that Haney's size really started to turn heads. At a height of 5'11", with a ton of muscle mass on his frame, he was one of the biggest bodybuilders to ever grace the stage at the time. A year later, he took the title, and he didn't let go of it again for 8 straight years, having captured bodybuilding's most coveted prize for 8 consecutive contests. He was the youngest man ever to capture the title at age 24, earning himself a place in the Guinness Book of World Records. And he scored 2 perfect scores in 1986, the first time that had ever happened in the sport. 8 straight Olympia wins broke Arnold Schwarzenegger's previous record of 7, and to this day, only one other man has ever matched it. The 66-year-old holds the record for the most Mr. Olympia titles, a feat shared only with Ronnie Coleman and surpassing Arnold Schwarzenegger's 7-win record. What made Haney different from a lot of the mass monsters who came after him was the way he combined size with actual proportion and aesthetics. He reigned as champion during a key transition from the golden era to the era of mass monsters, and somehow managed to create a massive physique that also had definition and aesthetic appeal, a task few lifters have ever pulled off. He walked away from competing in 1991 at just 31 years old, with his entire adult life still ahead of him. Lee Haney retired from bodybuilding in 1991 at the age of 31, meaning he had the rest of his adult life in front of him. And his bodybuilding career gave him the foundation he needed to live the life he wanted, showing him what he was passionate about and what his career focus should be going forward. That's when the second act of his career really took off, and it's the part of his story that makes the current diagnosis land so hard, because everything he built afterward was centered on the idea of health as something you actively manage and control. Since the late 1980s, Haney had 2 children, Olympia and Joshua, written books, hosted television and radio programs, and launched a line of supplement products. He authored guides on training, wrote about aging and fitness, and became a face people trusted when it came to staying strong deep into middle age and beyond. His stature grew well beyond the gym floor too. In 1998, President Bill Clinton appointed him to the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports, putting the former Mr. Olympia in a position of national influence over how Americans thought about exercise and health. He was later inducted into the International Sports Hall of Fame in 2014, cementing his place among the greats not just in bodybuilding, but across sport as a whole. Even in his 50s, journalists who caught up with him described a man who still looked like he belonged on stage. He was described as a fit 56, 5'11", and about 237 pounds, roughly 20 pounds lighter than when he was last Mr. Olympia. He still talked about fitness with the same intensity he'd carried since childhood. He said he'd wanted to be Samson or Hercules from the age of 6, that when he was 10, he asked his parents for a set of weights, and that he had his Charles Atlas book to go along with it. That's the image the public carried of Lee Haney for decades, the guy who conquered the biggest stage in bodybuilding and then spent the rest of his life teaching other people how to stay strong as they got older. He built an entire program specifically targeting men in exactly that demographic, promising them they could push back against the effects of time if they trained with the right guidance. And through every bit of that, every seminar, every supplement launch, every appearance where he told other men over 50 that age doesn't have to define your limits, his own kidneys were quietly deteriorating in the background. The condition he was managing privately never showed up in any of those public appearances. It never made it into his books or his TV specials. The invincible image held, right up until his own children decided the public needed to know the truth. Once the news was out, the response from the bodybuilding world and beyond moved fast, and it revealed just how deeply Haney's reach actually goes, even decades removed from competing. The offer to help wasn't just symbolic. Haney made clear this wasn't a simple ask. It was a real, structured medical process, and he wanted to remove every possible barrier for anyone willing to step up. He turned to the fitness community in the hope of finding a living donor, offering to cover all the costs of testing and the transplant itself. That's a significant offer. Living kidney donation isn't a small procedure, and the financial side alone stops a lot of willing donors from ever following through. Haney wanted that excuse gone. News outlets covering the story made sure to lay out exactly what it would take for someone to actually help him. Those interested in helping Haney could scan a QR code included in his social media post or call a dedicated phone line. with donors required to be between the ages of 18 and 65. One report even tied the appeal directly to a major transplant program, noting the process was cross-referenced with his historic professional records and medical donor requirements provided by the Emory Living Donor Program. The comment sections underneath every version of this story told the same story, an outpouring that went well past polite sympathy. The comments were filled with support and well wishes, with one commenter writing that everyone was saying they were praying for his dad, but no one was asking what his blood type was, while another declared they'd give Lee Haney a kidney and were ready to go. That kind of response doesn't happen for just anyone. It happens for a guy who spent 40 years being a reference point for an entire industry. Coaches who grew up idolizing him, competitors who measured themselves against his record, everyday gym members who bought his supplement kits and followed his programs because his name meant something. When word got out that he needed help, that entire network activated at once. Haney, for his part, kept trying to strike a balance in every public statement, grateful for the support, but adamant that people shouldn't treat him like he was already gone. He said he continued to lean on his faith, describing it as always having been his superpower, thanking everyone for being genuinely concerned, and insisting he was still well and fully functional. It's a tricky line to walk, asking the public for a life-saving organ while also trying to project calm and control. But it's exactly the kind of balancing act that defined his whole public career. Even in crisis, he was still coaching people, still managing the message, still trying to be the picture of composure under pressure. His son continued fielding questions from people who wanted to apply but weren't sure if they qualified. He urged any interested party to fill out the questionnaire regardless of their blood type, explaining that the form itself filters applicants, and that for now they were simply asking anyone interested to apply. That detail matters. It means the family wasn't just hoping for a miracle match to appear out of nowhere. They built an actual pipeline, an actual system, designed to process a flood of well-meaning strangers into real, viable candidates. Meanwhile, the wider bodybuilding community had its own reasons to feel the weight of this news particularly hard. Just months before Haney's own announcement, the sport had already been rattled by news involving the very man who shares his Olympia record. Reports had circulated about bodybuilding legend Ronnie Coleman being hospitalized after suffering a serious medical condition, according to his family. Two of the only 3 men in history to ever hold that record, both dealing with major health scares within the same stretch of time. For a community that already spends a lot of time debating the long-term toll bodybuilding takes on the body, that timing hit hard. It's worth remembering, too, that Haney hadn't stepped away from the sport entirely even before any of this broke. He'd remained a visible, active voice. Just months earlier, following the 2025 Mr. Olympia competition, he'd ignited a debate in the sport, arguing that the current open division format unfairly pits drastically different physiques against each other, potentially hindering the sport's evolution and threatening athlete well-being. Here was a man still actively shaping the conversation around athlete health in bodybuilding, doing it while carrying a private health battle of his own that most people watching him speak had no idea about. That's the picture that had formed by the time his kidney appeal went fully public. A legend still engaged with his sport, still coaching, still building programs for other people's health, quietly managing a ticking clock that had been running since long before most of today's competitors ever picked up a weight. So where does that leave things? Lee Haney is still here. He's still talking, still posting, still running his programs, still hosting his annual games in the Atlanta area. Now retired, Haney remains active in the sport and hosts the annual Lee Haney Games in the greater Atlanta area. None of that has stopped because of the diagnosis. If anything, he's leaned into being more public than ever, using his platform to turn a private struggle into an open call for help. That's really the story underneath all of this. Not a collapse, not a man being taken down by his own body after decades of dominance. It's something closer to a long, quiet negotiation between a legend and a condition that was never going to care about his titles, his records, or his Hall of Fame plaque. He was told 26 years ago this day would come. He spent that time doing everything within his control, faith, nutrition, training, discipline, to push it back as far as it could go. And now that runway has run out, and he's asking the same community that watched him dominate a stage in the 1980s to step up in a completely different way. There's something almost fitting about how he's framed it publicly. He's not hiding from cameras. He's not disappearing from view the way a lot of public figures might when facing something this serious. He's standing in front of his fans, telling them plainly what he needs, correcting the rumors when they spiral out of control, and trying to keep the tone hopeful, even while asking strangers to consider giving up a piece of their own body for him. The bodybuilding world's response has, in its own way, mirrored the way Haney built his career in the first place. Through community, through mentorship, through the relationships he spent decades cultivating outside of the competition stage. The flood of offers, the questionnaires, the donor line lighting up. None of that happens without the second act of his life, the one where he became a coach and mentor to men well past their competitive years, teaching them that health isn't something you get to once and keep forever. It's something you keep fighting for. That framing cuts both ways now. Haney spent years telling other people over 50 that age doesn't have to define their limits. That with the right program, you can reclaim your vitality. Now he's the one testing exactly how far discipline and faith can carry a body when the problem isn't lifestyle. It's written into your genes. He's said as much himself, that this isn't punishment for anything he did in the gym. It's a card he was dealt by his family tree, one that showed up in relatives who never touched a weight in their life. What happens next depends on something completely outside his control for the first time in his adult life. Not training volume, not diet, not supplementation. It depends on whether a stranger with the right blood type and the right kidney decides to step forward. That's a strange position for a man who spent 8 years being told he was the standard nobody else could meet. For the first time, his fate rests in someone else's hands entirely. Whatever comes next for Haney, the fight he's in now doesn't get decided on a stage, under lights, in front of judges holding up scorecards. It gets decided in a hospital, in a lab, in a match between his body and a donor's. And for a man who spent his whole life being called untouchable, that's the most human turn his story could have taken.